Yeah, welcome to the River Management Society hosting our conversation about responding to ever-growing love for river recreation. And this is the State Rivers Program Working Group that we have had in place for about a year. And we'll be introducing the folks who will be sharing today. And let's see, I guess we can go to the first slide. Yeah. So this is who you'll be hearing from today. My name is Risa Shimoda, and I'm here with Angie Furman. Angie, wanna wave from the River Management Society, and we'll have you guys wave to Lilia Mellon, National Park Service, Rivers and Trails Program, and then you'll be hearing a presentation from Janine Balek. Is that correct, Janine?
You are great.
From the Oregon State Marine Board. And also John Wank, Iowa Department of Natural Resources. Thanks, John. And then final presenter is Aaron Dieters with Jupiter Environmental. And you might know Aaron from having worked in Kansas. I can't remember what department, tourism, wildlife, parks, recreation, everything, that department. So Lily is going to take this in a minute, but then after that, each person is going to speak for a while, have a few questions, and then we'll have just general questions or a general discussion before we close it out in an hour.
Great. Thanks, Risa. So my name is Lilia Mellon, and as we just said, I work for a branch of the National Park Service called the Rivers, Trails, and Conservation Assistance Program, and we offer technical assistance to all sorts of groups who want to further their mission. So River Management Society had started the State Rivers Program, maybe about a year ago, and I came on board about in the winter time to try to help move this idea. And it's really an idea is to network amongst people, and it's not just people who work on state rivers, it's everyone, to see how we can help each other network better and move the needle along for all things rivers. So as I think you've seen, I hope you have, we've come up with a program of what to talk about each month from now through till next spring. I think we detailed it out. Really, and trying to spark your interest and to learn from each other, etc. So for that, this is our first one of the fall. We had begun this last spring, and we talked about COVID for a while, and then we talked about equity, diversity, and inclusion, and now we're going to kind of intersperse traditional river issues that people have expressed interest in knowing more about, and also how to make our rivers more inclusive to everyone. So with that, I think we'll get going. And as Risa just said, each of the presenters is going to talk. Feel free to ask questions after their presentation, and then at the end, we'll hopefully have time for overall thoughts and questions.
So I'm Janine Black. I'm with the Oregon State Marine Board, and I'm our Boating Facilities Program Manager. And I want to use this time to kind of talk about our Waterway Access Program, but kind of how Oregon got the program and then what we're going to do with it. So we got this program through about a 10-year process, and so I'm going to spend about 5-10 minutes kind of outlining the process we went. So if you're interested in how to go about approaching the non-motorized boating community, this is some good takeaways and some lessons learned, and then I'll get into some of the details about the program. So in 2010, we started a strategic planning process, and this was the question we were going to ask. We wanted to know basically, how did we deal with the current and the future? And so to give you some background, the Marine Board has been historically funded by motorized titling, registration, and fuel taxes. And so because that was the source of our funding, we were very focused on motorized boating. And over the years, we have seen a dramatic increase of non-motorized, as well as non-motorized boaters have said they wanted a seat at the table. They wanted basically some equitable treatment associated with what we did as an agency. So we started this very lengthy outreach process, and that included customers, voters, organizations. There was workshops, public meetings, a very lengthy process. And through it, it identified 7 focus areas that also had 52 strategies. And so it was a lot of information, and my governing board decided to prioritize 4 of those focus areas. So I numbered them, and that isn't necessarily ranking order, it's just the order that they were in the publication. And out of that, we formed a project for non-motorized boating. So part of the non-motorized project was how to figure out how to integrate non-motorized boating and boater needs into our agency operation. And to be honest, we as an agency really didn't know. And so our approach was to to solicit for people to represent non-motorized interests on an external committee. So we had 16 people representing every kind of boating. The one group we could not get to participate was from the kiteboarding, sailboarding associations or representatives. And we wanted to have a balance with people who rented craft, guides, law enforcement, as well as a parks provider in a wild and scenic area, and then a parks provider just in the river area. So beyond that, we also wanted geographic, we wanted gender, we wanted organization and individuals. We really wanted a very diverse and robust external advisory committee, because this committee was going to tell us how or if there was a purpose or value to the non-motorized boating community. So, well, I should say before that, this non-motorized group was a 2-year process. It was a very lengthy process. It involved 9 meetings. Let me see, we did a statewide assessment of non-motorized boating needs. And then the committee also asked us to do a national reach. So we surveyed every state and the territory, and I will say we had 100% response of telling us how non-motorized boaters were currently paying into boating, if they were paying, whether it was through a sales tax, a registration fee, something on how they were contributing to boating within the state or the territory. And we gave all this information to our advisory committee, and they told us to take it out and do public meetings and collect information. So we had 17 different public meetings. It was a very robust process, and through that, the advisory committee basically said, this is what we think you should take to the legislature. So in 2017, we made our first attempt to have a non-motorized boating program. And essentially, all sizes of boats would have been paying a fee. It would have been transferable between boats. So if you owned 5 boats, but you only ever put 2 in the water, 2 would need to have a permit. Life jackets, this was a big one because of the amount of drownings and issues that were going on with a lot of the swimming group. The advisory committee really wanted life jackets for anybody on a river or stream that was on a pool toy, an air mattress, those giant inflatable tacos you see out there. And then they wanted to establish standards for a voluntary education program, and they wanted it to be combined with our aquatic invasive species permit. So that was a lot of stuff to put forth. And then essentially what the non-motorized boaters would have gotten is some public access grant money. Law enforcement would have gotten about half of the pot of money. There would have been grants for instructors or organizations to provide education. And there would have been some technical assistance from my program to help with permitting and design and engineering for access. So needless to say, this did not even get out of committee. There was so much contention, and there was a lot of questioning on what was really the benefit. There were organizations who just were adamant against the life jackets. And there was a lot of folks who said, we don't see a benefit to us and our sport. And so it just went down in a lot of flames. And as an agency, we had spent a lot of time working with non-motorized community, trying to figure out what would be a benefit. So when it went down in flames, we regrouped and we had some discussion and said, let's take all this testimony and let's approach it and say, not what they don't like, let's talk about what they do want. And so we gathered everything up, and it was very apparent that access was what the boaters wanted. The law enforcement stuff, they didn't see a lot of benefit for. The education, there was some interest, but by and large, most people said they were educated through other organizations, through groups, through other parties, and it was a very low priority. But access is what resonated with folks. Everyone found an interest in that. And so we regrouped. And in 2019, we put forth a new legislative concept, and we narrowed it down. So before it was for every boat, now it was for boats that were 10 feet in length or longer. And that was important because those were the boaters that were already buying the invasive species permit. So those were a group of boaters that we had a way to contact and work directly with. It was still going to be transferable. Children 14 years and older would need one. If you boated in a wild and scenic river that had a permit or be associated with it, so in Oregon, that would be like the John Day, the Deschutes, the Rogue, you were not required to buy a permit because you already were paying a permit to boat in those sections. We also wanted to recognize that our tribal nations, canoeing is their culture, and we did not want them to have to get a permit to engage in tribal fishing or ceremonial events. So we wanted to exempt them from needing a permit as well. So we put forth this concept, and what the boaters would have got was public access, but it was an expanded public access. We were going to be able to help buy leases, easements, lots of property. We were going to be able to look at things for whitewater parks and competition courses, as well as all the standard stuff of replacing, renovating, repairing of existing, building new, expanding, docks, ramps, pole slides, sanitation, racks, showers, changing rooms, just about any type of access improvement that you could imagine a non-motorized boater using, those were going to be eligible underneath the program. And we also wanted to have grants out to underserved communities. And there's a lot of new boaters, there's a lot of people who have an interest but don't know how to approach it. So we wanted some money to be able to help organizations, companies, NGOs provide safety and education and opportunities. And we made it very broad because we all had examples that had come up through this process. We had a small community that had this beautiful reservoir in their backyard, but the youth did not have a way to get to it. So we had a community group said, would you be willing to fund a 16-passenger van for the summer and for us to be able to transport the youth to the reservoir to provide safety and training and use on paddlecraft? And we said, yeah, that makes sense. That would be something that would be eligible. We also talked about opportunities for events like Wounded Warriors. If they wanted to have a specialized event, could we help, fund that event or fund specialized equipment? Yep, we were open to doing that, as well as the maps. We currently funded a grant that will take a bunch of boating information and put it into Spanish as well as in Man. And we're doing some signage that is in different languages. So those are some of the things we want to be able to do to underserved communities. and provide that opportunity to either learn about boating or know how to boat safely. How do you read the river? What does certain language mean? And so that was something we really wanted to provide. And then the technical assistance aspect. So we expanded it, working in endangered species waterways and sensitive areas tribally, wetlands, changes to stormwater management, FEMA floodplain development. We're finding there's a lot of parties who do not have a skill set to navigate that very complicated process. So we have one position out of this package that will help with engineering, design, survey, both topographic and bathymetric survey. We can help with feasibility and siting of access, as well as through the myriad of permit processes. So that was a huge thing to help facility owners or potential facility owners be successful. And then we also wanted to have some free boating days. So we're trying to coordinate with our Department of Fish and Wildlife where the fishing and boating days can maybe align. And I want to say we're looking at 6 days, but I haven't verified that that's it. So that's what we're going to be giving back. And the legislature approved it. So it was approved in the 19th session. We went through rulemaking. The permit was began to be required in January, but was not enforced until August of 2020. And that was to give us a very healthy 8 months to educate and inform people. And then we did our first grant cycle in August, awarding some of the money that was being paid into it. So the grant program. So we talked to a lot of folks, a lot of cities, counties, ports, park districts, park associations, and said, we have this new program. We were thinking of integrating it application-wise into our existing. And part of our thought was there are a lot of sites that have both a motor and a non-motorized component, and how challenging it would be for an applicant to apply for 2 different grants and then try to align the timelines for board approval. And what if my board approved the motorized but not the non-motorized? Does that mean only half of the project could happen, or would the applicant have to find additional money? So we wanted to have one application to make it easier and to reduce a barrier for people to apply. And we also, as part of this, we challenged applicants to try to have an education component with an access component, because a lot of times you can have some education at the access or look at signage, information, training, and we wanted to push basically a lot of our government entities to start forming partnerships with a lot of the NGOs and to be a steward by bridging some of those partnerships and making some things happen at Access for folks. So we wanted to streamline. It was supported by everyone. Nobody saw anything about it. They've actually been pushing some other state agencies to do something similar, and that hasn't happened yet, but this was an important process for us. So eligibility, so those are all the different parties currently underneath our motorized program. Tribal governments and nonprofit NGOs are not eligible for those. We anticipated that during this legislative session, someone may submit something to have tribal governments eligible for our motorized funding. But politics are strange. I'm not sure that's going to happen now. But I would say probably in the next 4 to 5 years, I would anticipate that tribal governments would become eligible for motorized funding. And then, let's see. And then by the activity. So access development is really targeted to governmental entities. And part of it is a risk assessment of how long somebody's going to be there, what kind of things we can enforce contractually with our grant agreements. We take the money that the non-motorized boaters have entrusted us with very seriously, and we want to make sure that if somebody violates a grant, we have a way to recover those funds that were entrusted. So my board decided to reduce risk, that physical access improvements would be with government entities, but it doesn't mean we can't work with NGOs or nonprofits as somebody to help stir the pot and get those governmental entities excited about access, and a partner on one. We're working right now with the Tualatin River Keepers on identifying several access points on the Tualatin River, and they're actually facilitating and working with some of the cities to move forward on things. So there's a lot of nexus with that. And then the technical assistance. So of course, money. We can give money. We're really good about giving money. If that's all somebody needs, we can do that. If they want help with design and engineering or permitting or planning, we can also do that. Some projects will be very large, and we may actually recommend that a consultant be hired just because of our bandwidth. I will say, when we've announced that this program was approved by the legislature, in about 9 months, I had over 200 requests for technical assistance, and that is continuing to grow. I had another one come in yesterday from the U.S. Forest Service. So I have a staff, including myself, of 9. So we have one registered civil engineer. I have 4 boating facility designers, 1 environmental permitting coordinator, and I have a GIS planner. So we're a very small staff. And as you can imagine, there's 1,500 access points in Oregon. We are based out of Salem, so we travel and across the state to see whatever we need to do and collect whatever information we need to help the facility owners. But we definitely have a backlog right now, and there are times where we will recommend having a consultant, and we will help you hiring a consultant or reviewing things if that's not something that you have expertise or knowledge on, or you want another set of eyes. Those are things we will gladly help you with. And then this is historic things that we would be asked for from our motorized program. It's amazing how many restrooms are still out there from the 1950s and 60s that are slowly sinking into the ground because they have failed systems, bad pipes, not ADA, and then a lot of erosion, stormwater management stuff is really elevated up as well. And then new things, so kayak, canoe racks, separation of use. There's a lot of times where we can have a shared parking area or shared restroom, but the point of entry into the water could be separated to make it better for both user groups. And then damage repairs. There's a lot of gravel carry downs or partial things that maybe were not in the best location based on the river hydraulics, and they've been eroded and eaten away. So we're getting a lot of requests to come and look at trails, look at access, and see if we can help them locate it in a more stable area. Accessibility, ADA is a very high priority for us. And then of course the parking, and then specialized docks, those type of things. And then new access. So what you see in that upper left picture was actually a slide area that was used by drift boaters. It's almost a complete vertical drop that they would winch boats up and down, and the bank was getting eroded and it just kept creeping, and we were asked if we can come take a look, and so we worked with several different parties to come up with a pole slide situation where the steps were very wide, where you could square up to the boat and have landing platforms on each step, and then a lot of bank restoration. So something brand new that never existed essentially, or was a user-made thing, became a full project. And then property. So we're looking at new property to turn into access, as well as property that would address some issues at access. So the site you see with the little ramp and dock, that's a low freeboard dock, a little narrow concrete ramp, but there's really only parking for 3 to 4 vehicles. And so the gravel kind of dirty area off in the corner, that became for sale at a very reasonable price. And so my board just provided a grant to the city to purchase that so there can be designated parking for non-motorized boaters. And it also provides a better area for you to offload your kayaks and canoes or rafts and not be blocking the road, because it's a busy road that will have some trucks going through it. So those are some of the access parts. And then the whole education, boating safety. So videos and signs and behavior messaging, alternative language or training. If you have staff that have been providing guided tours and you want to have ACA certification, that's eligible for a grant. Or if you're looking at doing a river steward program and you want some incentives or t-shirts or signage to help promote and facilitate that, those things are eligible because it provides that education component for boaters who are entering into a waterway. So it's a very broad thing, partially because we don't know all the things we don't know, and people are creative and inventive and they come up with great ideas that unfortunately a lot of times rules are so restrictive they don't allow for that creativity. So we wanted some flexibility to provide funding to help facilitate some of those fantastic ideas people come up with. So design and engineering, I'm assuming most of you are familiar that this is not a simple process in an ESA listed waterway. So I thought kind of to give you an idea, normally when we assist with permits, we will have 10 to 12 different state, local, federal agencies commenting on permits. And so it gets to be a very long, lengthy process. To make repairs to an existing facility, a typical permit may take 18 months. If it's a new facility, we're in the generally 5 to 9 years, depending on the complexities of what is on the land. But for us, the big part is when we help someone, we want to do a high level concept. We want somebody to look at and say, yes, this is the vision. This is what we picture. We want to be able to take that, and we as a state agency will start some discussions with the tribe. We're required to have meaningful consultation with Oregon's tribes, and we take it very seriously. So we start those conversations with the tribes to see if they have concerns, what those concerns would be, how they would like to be involved in projects. And then at the same time, we want the landowner to do some public process. This makes sure that the people who are going to use this is what they envision, and this solves the issues that they've identified. And then once everybody's on board, we start down that process, and it's a lengthy process. Now, any of those items underneath 3, those can be mini grants. Somebody can apply just to have the hydraulic analysis done, or an archaeological survey, or to develop the whole stormwater plan and get the no rise certification. So all of those can be mini grants as well to help people be successful on it. And then match. We try to be flexible with match. We like cash. Cash is always the best, but we realize cash is also a rare commodity. And so we work with folks on what kind of labor do you have? Do you have a road crew that could do some work? Do you have volunteers that could do plantings? What do you have? And let's talk about how we take advantage of those resources that you have, or equipment. We've got some creative people out there. We've had some cities and counties partner by sharing equipment. We've had a lot of volunteer groups who've done some fantastic things. So match shouldn't be a hurdle, and we work with folks to make it happen. And then comment. So this was a huge part of this program. As you can imagine, we're now going to non-motorized boaters saying, pay us and trust us that you're really going to get this. Needless to say, there was skepticism, and we wanted to be transparent. We wanted to build trust and really show that when you gave us money, it's going for what we said it would go for. And as part of that, we wanted to have all of our grant applications go through a public comment process. So we put them on our website, and we solicit out, we hit every email group, social media, our website. Our Department of Fish and Wildlife shared this information on all of their fishing stuff. So our first bout of applications, we had 19 applications, and it was about 1,500 pages by the time you added all the permits, the drawings, photos, and we had 67 comments that were very meaningful. They provided fabulous information. But we had some people who read all 1,500 pages and provided comments. And so the public took it very serious. We were very grateful because we didn't know if we would have comments bashing government. But in truth, people took it to heart. And like I said, they gave us very good information that helped shape recommendations for funding, the amount, even clarification questions from the owner. So it was a process we went through. The applications were up there. We share how projects were ranked, the type of money they received, and that way at any time somebody can see what was done, what we said should happen, did it really happen? So that was a way that we wanted to enhance transparency. We've also added things on our website, so our grant timelines are all there for the next 2 years. We have all of our forms. There's ways to get a hold of every one of my staff if somebody has questions. And we also provided legislative reports on what we did with this money. So that's also on our webpage for the transparency. And so this is me, I'm the top line. And then Jennifer is our program assistant. She can track people down. So if we're out in the field, she has every phone number we can possibly be reached at. So if somebody really needs something, there's always a way to get a hold of folks. And then the link to our website. So it's a lot of stuff. I feel like over the last 10 years, I'm sure I have missed some information to share. I will say the biggest takeaway that I've come away with is partnerships are huge. And there's a lot of times where I will work with one party and I'm struggling to find somebody in another area, and I will reach out to them and say, hey, do you know of somebody, or can you give me a point of contact? And they'll put me in connection with folks. But we are forming partnerships that are new and exciting. For those of you who don't know, we had a lot of wildfires and we've got a lot of debris. We've had some folks talk about shutting down some of these rivers because of the amount of debris. And that was something very scary for us. And we've started having conversations with Tom O'Keefe and Priscilla Macy about having them identify some of those hazards in whitewater areas. And we're working on a GIS survey hub to actually document those areas to help inform people and to work with the upland land managers to hopefully mitigate some of those as well. So that's a partnership that's new, and I think is largely because of these programs, and we're excited about it. There are so many opportunities. It's exciting. It is so exciting to have this, and really as an agency be able to address all recreational boating in an equitable manner and to be able to meet those needs. Because before I would hear from users and I would empathize with them, and then I'd have to say, I'm sorry, but money comes from motorized. And now we can say, no, let's talk about this, and let's find solutions, let's find ways to make things work. So it's a very exciting thing for us. So if anybody's got questions, fire away, or feel free to save them to the end as well.
Okay. Well, my name is John Wink. I'm the Water Trails Coordinator for the Iowa Department of Natural Resources, and I've been in my position for about 10 years, actually just over 10 years in October. And we had, well, because of COVID, I don't know about you guys, but we've had an abundance of activity, people using our accesses in our waterways like we've never seen. And honestly, before COVID, we have noticed an increase in paddling, in river use activity, anecdotally, and of course that also is consistent with national outdoor industry surveys that have shown that kayaking itself, just recreational kayaking, has doubled over the past 10 years, while canoeing has pretty much stayed the same. So paddling activity has just been on an upward trend. And then when COVID happened, and we're still in the midst of it, our state parks, as well as our rivers and waterways, just got hit even harder. And, you know, in some areas, we got chased out of Dodge when, you know, the local conservation folks invited us in to talk about developing a water trail. In some of the areas, the rivers were already getting so heavily used that the landowners didn't want us even developing a water trail because they thought by promoting it, they would get increased, you know, problems like they'd been seeing, but even worse. So, you know, we disengaged from a couple projects because of that. And then during COVID, they were like, well, but we have these problems. We hope you can help solve because the accesses were just so packed with people, and cars were parked on the roads, and so we look at our program not as just about promoting rivers, but also about solving problems, and we try to educate the landowners and people who are sort of, you know, hesitant to want a water trail that, you know, if you're not having problems yet, you likely will. And we think we can offer solutions. But anyway, it's been just an atypical year all around. Not only did we get hit with higher use, but we also got fewer dollars to work with. And then Iowa itself had just an enormous weather event called a derecho, where we had winds that gust as high as 130 miles per hour. That's like an EF3 tornado. And we had, I mean, trees knocked over. It was unbelievable. Unbelievable. And the final tally actually was just reported on the news a couple days ago that there was $7.5 billion in damage. It's the worst thunderstorm in the history of the nation. Now, thunderstorm, not hurricane, not tornado, but thunderstorm, worst in the history of the nation. And we got a call the next day after the derecho. Actually, it was on, it was the next day. On the South Skunk River, and they wanted to close the river. And honestly, we don't think that we can close the river. We don't have the power to do that. But we recommended that they could close accesses. And the reason why is there were so many downed trees across the South Skunk River in Story County that they were concerned about the hazards that people were going to run into. So they did close their accesses. We helped develop signs. And if anything, this year has, you know, just made it very clear that there needs to be some protocols. There needs to be some solutions to issues that arise on rivers. I know Minnesota has a crew that goes out and removes log jams every year on their water trails, on their state designated water trails. You know, that's an idea. We have used the Conservation Corps to do things like that. But I think the biggest thing is staying connected. Um, Once we've developed a water trail, we have a written agreement that everyone signed that identifies who's responsible for what and how frequent. And when you've got that sort of connection and network, when things like this happen, you can work together and you know, do what you think is best. Like putting signage up in a rapid amount of time, getting the word out, sending press releases. And that's a nice thing about I think our state water trails system is that it's very, very well coordinated. We have a lot of good partnerships out there that if we didn't have a water trails program, we wouldn't have that. And I don't think the weather's going to get any less. I think it's going to get worse as the years go on. But anyway, I just wanted to point out, you know, how important it is to have that coordinated network, and then also just, you know, comment on the number of people that are using our natural resources, likely due to COVID. But.
Well, thanks, John. And I think so. We've gone from this this program that has discovered that designating fees can go back to supporting human-powered recreation, to an example I think that we heard from many different states and even federal partners also about how being popular, almost getting overwhelmed, and having that being exaggerated through both popularity and the COVID pandemic response this year has indicated that there's a lot of need to find funding sources for providing recovery of safety, you know, cleaning debris, keeping the waterways clear, and also improving facilities. Just here's what I think is an opportunity and is quite different. It sounds really different from what you might have heard of for funding waterway usage, safety, clean water, and so forth. But it's both innovative and kind of audacious in some ways, but it's also really old. It's also, you know, 5-6 decades old. So we'll hear from.
All right, well, thank you, Risa. Good afternoon. Thanks for inviting me on here to talk. I'm Aaron Dieters with Juniper Environmental in Holton, Kansas. I'm a project manager and a river project coordinator. So it's a new position, it's a new company, and I'm new to this area, or new to this job itself. So Risa had asked if I'd speak on our recent conversations, efforts on a potential funding mechanism for paddle sports. You know, there's other efforts out there that are currently underway similar to this, but hopefully I can put a little spin on this and show why it's different and maybe a different direction that we should be going. And I'll come back to that at the end of this presentation. I was formerly with the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks about a month ago in Topeka, Kansas, as a wildlife biologist supervisor and as a Kansas River Access coordinator. So it was the summer of 2019. I was at the River Rally in Cleveland and was sitting next to Risa in one of the breakout sessions in the afternoon on a presentation. And after the presentation, there were some questions, and somebody stood up in the audience and said, well, paddlers aren't conservationists. And you know, I kind of paused on that for a moment, and I thought to myself, well, yeah, at face value, we're not, but why not? You know, we do utilize a resource, whether arguably it's consumptive or non-consumptive, but we utilize a resource, and so why can't we work to conserve that resource? So did that show up?
Not yet.
Not moving forward.
Maybe Janine can coach you.
I think it's there. You can see that the next little pop-up line. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So hunters have been doing this. Hunters' claim to fame across the nation is they're the world's best conservationists, wildlife conservationists, and they've been doing it since 1937. Ultimately, it's the funding that's needed. It's the Wildlife Conservation Act of 1937. So during that meeting, I leaned over to Risa and I said, are you familiar with the Pittman-Robertson Act? So she said no. So I started to explain the concept that hunters have been using this to generate the funding for wildlife restoration efforts across the United States. It's officially known as the Pittman-Robertson Federal Aid and Wildlife Restoration Act. It's known by a lot of names. I commonly refer to it as the PR. Most state agencies call it PR funds, but it's a user pay, user benefit manufacturer excise tax that's applied to specific items in the sportsman and the hunting world. In this instance, it's firearms and ammunition, and since 1937, it's included other things like arrows. Fishing has developed its own similar type of act as well. But it's pretty unique having Janine on the call today, because this act originated in Oregon with Carl Shoemaker. He was a former department director or former chief of the Oregon Fish and Game Commission. So he drafted the first bill and presented it to Senator Key Pittman and asked if he would sponsor the bill, and he overwhelmingly did. So Shoemaker drafted the first bill, and then ultimately President Roosevelt signed it into law in September 1937. So this is where manufacturers make quarterly payments to the government. In this case, it's administered by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They administer and disperse the funds back to the states on eligible practices every quarter at a 75-25% rate. So there's a formula for states based on the number of licensed hunters they have in the state, and the square miles of that state geographically takes up. And then it's divvied back out to the states. It hits a cap at 5%, but not less than 0.5%. So I believe Texas hits the 5% cap every year because of their land mass. So with that, Risa and I then discussed. So we have this model that's been very successful out there, the user pay, user benefit model. What do we do next? Well, I know that one of the things that Carl Shoemaker did was he went to New York and he met with the SAMS group. SAMS was the Sporting Arms and Ammunition Manufacturers Institute, and to get their support, because you don't have the manufacturers, it's kind of an uphill battle the entire way. So Risa suggested, hey, let's go to the paddle sports retailer in Oklahoma City. It's just a few hour drive for me to go down there. Risa had lined up at her booth a sign-up sheet to have a dinner that night, and let's invite some of the manufacturers, whoever's interested. Unfortunately, that night before, there were some pretty nasty thunderstorms, knocked out the power to the restaurant. So when we met on site, met at the front of the restaurant was closed. We had to come up with another location. And as you're on the street and you're watching people walk by that you don't know, they don't know you, you don't know if you're missing people. So we don't know who we missed at that point. So we decided, so we ended up having a meeting with a few of us. There was representation from Oklahoma, ACA, and a few others. Risa, I don't recall exactly. But the next day, Risa and I went around to some of the manufacturers' booths at the show and presented this next 4 slides that I have. And these were some handouts that I made up to give out as a kind of a sales pitch to the manufacturers. So this was a first page of 2. This was the first handout, and this was kind of the overview of what the PR Act is. What's the purpose of it, the eligible product, the eligible projects, how it's apportioned, the requirements, limitations. And then on the flip side on this, it was the main point here was the cycle of success. It's how you invest tax dollars, this excise tax, back into that specific user group. And there was a study done in 2011 by Southwick and Associates titled "The Financial Returns to Industry from the Federal Aid and Wildlife Restoration Program." And missing the numbers off of here, but it was, the numbers are pretty staggering. The return on investment to manufacturers who paid the excise tax ranged from a low of 823% in 1976 to a high of 1,588% in 1997. The ROI for individual projects ranged from 32% to 3,877%. So it's like once you gave them this little spill of information of how you invest back into your users who are buying your goods, you're creating more users to buy more goods, to pay more tax. It's a great cycle, and it's been very, very effective. So in Kansas, if you look on the bottom left, our PR apportionments to Kansas has been over 14 million. Last year, it dipped a little bit down to 11 million. But with that, we've been able to add the additional public hunting access in Kansas, a state that's 97% privately owned. This year, we have about 1.4 million acres of walk-in hunting available to the public. We also have a program with Habitat First. We've treated over 100,000 acres of habitat annually, and that's because of this federal excise tax. So then I made up another page, and it was a what if. What if we had a Paddle Sports for Conservation Act? And what could we do with that? You know, if we put a straight 10% excise tax. And I brought this to the manufacturers. The second page had the cycle of success. But one of the questions that we needed answered was, well, how big is this industry? It's hard to get a total grasp on it just by researching it. The manufacturers don't have a organized association. There's nobody to go to that's one representative. But we got a pretty good feeling that it's somewhere in that $500 to $1 billion a year. So if you were just to take, for example, the 500 million and you had a 10% excise tax on that, and without any formula, and you just divvied that evenly up to the states, $1 million a state with match required, you know, in Kansas, what would that mean in this first year? An additional 1,000 acres of miles open to the public access, and another 2,000 acres of riparian areas enhanced for water quality. I think you could do some pretty staggering things with that. So I would say that it wasn't the easiest sell, but it was better. But it was a sales pitch that wasn't tough. One of the gentlemen made a comment that he had received another excise tax questionnaire in the mail, and he said that, you know, immediately it was as not only a no but a hell no. But until we did the little sales pitch, explain the cycle of success, I think that they come around to it. So I guess what's next? You know, there are others pursuing similar efforts right now, and I don't know where the final bill is, but the boating trust fund, the sport fish and restoration fund and boating trust fund was combined in I believe in the early 80s. That was up for reauthorization in 2020. I know that the Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation approved it in August, but I'm not sure where it was at. It was supposed to go on to the full Senate, and I'm just not up on that at the moment. But in that had language that was brought in by the National Marine Manufacturers Association that was asking Congress to look at studies for non-motorized vessels in waterways and to say, how could that fit into that funding mechanism or that trust fund? It makes me a little nervous because, you know, shouldn't non-motorized vessels have a seat at that table? To have other groups come in and say, well, you're not paying your fair share, so we're going to mandate that you pay your fair share whether you like it or not. That doesn't set well with me. The other thing is when you start putting money from one user group into you're modifying a fund that maybe it wasn't developed for in the first place. Is that the best situation? You know, in Kansas or the Midwest and the Great Plains, if you start looking at water quality is done on the terrestrial side of things, and I don't think the boating trust fund would be the mechanism to make sure water quality is treated. So it was interesting to hear Janine talk about the access being the overwhelming part of it and not water quality. I would venture to say in the Midwest, and John, maybe you would have a better feel for this also. You're Iowa, very similar to Kansas, but I would think that water quality, just looking at what we face and the initiatives in place for improving water quality, I think that would be a big driving force in the Midwest. So with that, it's I'm sure Risa is open for any questions as well. Risa's been right here. She's been the one more driving this with me.
Yeah, it's a big concept, Aaron, but I think that it's something that, and the manufacturers that we spoke to, paddle sports is a tough industry because it's sort of headless. There is no, like you said, no central organization, and it's been that way for a while. The small manufacturers that are owned by their original founders all said this is a great idea. They're users, they're empathetic with the needs, they're probably themselves working on water quality or access issues themselves. Many of the companies now, though, are owned by investment groups. So they're pumping out kayaks here and there, somewhere in the world. And those who are running the companies probably don't paddle even. So they're not really connected with the sport. It's really difficult to have the conversation with them because all they see is the initial short-term hit on their margin, and they might not understand the nature of the sport or engagement to see how the circle would work. So I think that we're still at the beginning of this subject. I'm not sure how, and Janine, maybe you have a better idea of how the NMMA is involved. They're a force. I know that once I inquired, and they have 9 government people, lobbyists in DC, 9 of them just for their organization. So whatever issue they're working on, they could be of huge assistance. We definitely haven't, connected with them closely yet. I see a couple of questions. Jennifer Wampler from Virginia says, are there state water access programs established by state code? If so, what is the code section? I'm not even sure I even understand the question. Mainly because access programs are pretty, like SOBA, they're SOBA and access in the context of that world. In terms of human-powered recreation, I don't know that there is such a thing as a code that would cover access for human-powered recreation.
I just mean establishing the office of water, whatever it is that allows you to have state level people working on this. Is there a code section that establishes it in the same way that it would establish like a state parks or?
In Iowa, we do have code.
You do?
There's administrative code that governs our program specifically, and then there's also the money that's used for accesses, or some money. It's not the only money, but it's marine fuel tax. And in Iowa, it's pretty liberal. It goes beyond just motorized boats. It also includes non-motorized access. So you can use marine fuel tax money for that.
Do you happen to have the link to that code you could share in the chat box?
No, but if you give me your email, I'll email it to you. I'd have to do some looking up.
Okay.
We'll keep talking, and I'll look for it while we're talking.
So you guys, we're a little past the bottom of the hour, and we can stay on for those who have time. Definitely stay on, but I want to honor folks' time. The screen that Angie just put up are the folks who have been speaking today, and we're going to make sure we get copy of all the chat, share it with everyone, and there will be a recording. And then just really quick, and then we can come back to questions. Angie, you want to just show those 2 slides for future reference and for being able to find the recording, either yourself or those who you might speak with who are interested in this?
Yeah, so as Leila mentioned earlier, this is just part of a flyer that I've created that has some of the upcoming topics for these discussions. And I'm also going to put a link to this in the chat. And I don't know if I can attach a document right now into the chat, but I'll try to do that here in a second as we continue discussion. But we are recording this, and we are also planning on recording some of our upcoming sessions. So if you want to come back and take a look at a portion of this, or if you can't make one and you'd like to watch, you can just go to the River Training Center page. Under professionals, you'll see the first link down is the River Training Center. Not only does it have a lot of our upcoming trainings, but there's this nice graphic here that takes you to our video channel. You can click on that, or under the professionals tab, just below River Training Center is the video training, or the video training channel. And when you click on that, it takes you to our video channel. You can see some of our upcoming events, and then here you'll see conversations, and this is where we will be putting all of these videos, so you can come back and check them out. And you can also check out some of the other videos that we've got going on our website and channel as well. So just wanted to make sure that you know where to find these conversations. They are on our video channel, which you can reach from the training center page or the little drop-down menu. So, and I will work on trying to attach a link to the flyer, not a link, but the actual flyer in PDF form in the chat as well.
Great, thanks, Angie. So y'all are welcome to stay, ask a few more questions. Just wanted to ask if, let's see, David Wicks asked, we here in Kentucky also tried to implement a license fee. It never went anywhere. I believe in Kentucky, paddlers are interested in both access as well as water quality. He also asked, is there a state-by-state report on funding for paddle trails? I wonder, Lily, have you heard of something like that?
Get to my mute button. I do not know. There's certainly been reports about outdoor industry recreation, how much money people spend, but that's for all outdoor activities. I don't know. We could look into it.
Like the question on access that Jennifer had, I'm not sure how broadly or on a state-by-state basis how paddle trails are even acknowledged as such. There's water trails, there's paddle trails. It's not a category of investment like trails might be. Right? Some states may and some states may not. So I'm not sure that would be a killer state-by-state report to have if there were such a thing. But we could definitely look for it, and we can ask, like through our listserv, state by state, do you know of how your state is funded, and sew something together. There any other general questions? Questions for Janine's Janine? Her presentation was a while ago, but you're welcome to ask. And Janine, your program is so impressive. You're probably well into planning for next year.
Yes, yeah, the fires have caused some damage, and so at 2 o'clock my time, I'll actually be on a call with the Corps of Engineers talking about a site on the Rogue River that had some damage. So I see that David asked a question about how many states have fees or licenses for canoes or kayaks. I can share the information we collected from our advisory committee nationally, but it's very large. So I will, Lisa, if it's okay, I will probably have Jennifer upload it onto an FTP site that you guys could download it if you wanted to have it. I'm not sure if I still have access to a PowerPoint we did that kind of provided a synopsis of it, but I want to say there were 11 states about 10 years ago that charged some kind of a fee for paddlers And it varied. There were some that only charged a fee if the boat was 12 feet or larger. Some were just a blanket fee. And there were differences of registration versus essentially a user permit. But I can share that if that's of interest to folks.
That would be a really great resource because it is different in every state and is working at different levels of effectiveness at each state also.
Yeah, this is David Wicks. I just wanted to compliment. This is my first one of these state working group pieces. I've really enjoyed it, and I'm just very impressed in what you've done out in Oregon. And is there a write up on what what you've described? Your first trial run, and then your success. And is there a journal article someplace that we could share with our crew here?
Sure. There's a couple different things, and I can send them to Risa, but probably the easiest one to go through would be the report we just turned in to our legislative council on what we've done since the program was passed. And then we have some historic information about the previous legislative attempt. But yeah, we would be happy to share. Most of it is on our website. But it's not always easy to find things on a website unless you know what you're looking for. So I can send them, and then they can get posted to this part of the website for RMS. And I'm glad you liked it. I'm excited. This is it is fantastic to have so many different people to work with and opportunities and really approach river recreation holistically. And as part of it, we're forming a partnership with state parks because they do have a water trail. Well, they have a trail program that sometimes funds water trails to try to leverage each other's resources to get a bigger bang out for the buck. And we already have a very strong partnership with our Department of Fish and Wildlife. So we don't get those sport fish boating trust monies that Aaron mentioned. Those go to our Fish and Wildlife Agency, but they use my grant program to spend their boating dollars. So we're forming new alliances with other state agencies to figure out more resources that we can partner with and help out those access providers. So it's exciting. It is really exciting. I'm thrilled.
So I think we'll probably, any other questions? I wanted to encourage anyone to get in touch with any of us about, if you have more questions for Janine, you have her information, but also the project that Aaron mentioned. And you can, Aaron Dieters at juniorenvironmental.com. That is a huge project, and it's potentially of great benefit to all the states. So it's, like I said, it's audacious, but I think that it's really worth pursuing until we find out that it's been proposed and isn't going to work. But I think it's really worth it for something that has worked so well from 1937 till now with hunting and fishing. Needs a champion, and I'm hoping we can put together a little coalition to pursue that.
Is there a white paper already on that initiative? I'm fascinated with it.
No, I mean, it really exists on those slides, although I can provide some information about the Pittman Robertson, and there's another Wallop Row. But between the two, they have every lure, tackle box, gun, ammunition, anything that you purchase for fishing or hunting, the manufacturer sends a little bit to this fund. And states can apply for the fund based on certain parameters for fishing or for hunting, and they have access to it every single year. So and it just, the biggest hurdle is to get the manufacturers to part with a few cents per dollar and to talk about that cycle. And it's not easy, but it just has worked so well. It's sort of a proven thing. And so I can share some information about those and their success. And yeah,
Kentucky tried to do this with binoculars because the Fish and Wildlife folks were saying bird watching is the fastest growing piece. And so really binoculars should have this fee on it. And we all got a great laugh at it because then all of a sudden all the football games and people who sit up on the top stadiums would be paying for conservation, but that did not go through either. So binoculars don't have any funds going for that.
right. Well,
Yeah, so
I think,
with the trust fund, there are ways that a manufacturer can be exempted. So as an example, a lot of the tackle box manufacturers identify that they do not only serve fishing or angling, that they're also crafts, other things. So they became exempted on certain aspects of the tackle boxes. And the funds are broken out into different components. So like the Sport Fishing and Boating Trust Fund aspect goes out into some funds for coastal wetlands, for the Clean Vessel Act, the Boating Infrastructure Grant Program, as well as the sport fish restoration component of it, which is money for the fish hatcheries, the angling part, and 15% of that has to be spent on boating access. So kind of some background with the National Marine Manufacturers on the language is, I want to say 5-6 years ago, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service determined that the way the law was written, it did not exclude non-motorized boating access. And there was a lot of contention because when the law was passed, it was to capture the marine fuel tax associated with boating, as well as the part of the excise tax. And if you listen to all the testimony, it was very heavily lobbied by the motorized boating industry to create that. So there was, I would say, not a universal support that that money be opened up to non-motorized. So I think NMMA was looking at trying to have that user group contribute into the trust fund to help balance the money going to fund that type of access.
mhm.
I believe that's kind of the background associated with that language for it. But yeah, most of the money is an apportionment, and it's based on like how many registered hunters you have, how many registered boats you have with the Coast Guard, what is the population per capita, and so it's a fixed amount. And so the Pittman-Robertson money goes to the designated Fish and Wildlife Agency, just like the Boating Trust Fund money goes to the designated Fish and Wildlife Agency. And then they can appropriate it out to grants to other parties, or they can choose to spend it only on their properties. So there's some nuances associated with it.
Right. Well, thank you for all that knowledge. Janine, you know everything.
No.
Well, thanks so much for sharing that. Thanks everybody for joining us today. Gwen, it's great to see you. And David, thanks for joining us. And we'll share what's in the chat, and we'll announce to everyone that we have seen here today when the recording's available. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.